guys, welcome back to the channel by MWU. I'm MWU, aka Marianne, and if you're watching this at the beginning of 2025, Happy New Year! Admittedly, by the time this video goes live, I think we're gonna be at the end of January, so we're kind of well into 2025, and I recognize that this video is gonna be a little late, but you know what? That's okay. I thought I would take some time and reflect on my 2024 knitting goals and intentions, as well as talk a little bit about what my plans are for 2025. Spoilers, it's going to be very similar to 2024, so I thought I would just kind of walk through what went well or what didn't last year, and then talk about the updates that I'm making to those goals so that I can be a little bit more successful in 2025. As usual, I'll quickly mention what I'm wearing today just in case you're curious, but this is my Alder sweater by Rebecca Clow. I was recently actually told in a comment on my last video that I've been pronouncing her last name wrong. It's Clow, like glow, but with a C instead of Clow, which is how I was originally saying it. So I apologize for in the past if I was saying it wrong, and I apologize for the future if I ever say anything else wrong. Pronunciation is just like not my strong suit. Feel free to correct me in the comments whenever, as long as you're being friendly and nice about it, and I will happily try to adjust accordingly if I can remember. So Rebecca Clow in this case. This is a beautiful colorworked sweater that I finished up, I think last, I want to say April, maybe a little earlier, and it's a beautiful sweater. I love it. I think it's so classic. It's a raglan. I think the colorwork is just the right amount of visual detail, and to be honest, it's a quite simple colorwork because you're only ever holding one color at a time. You're not actually going between different colors within one row, so I think it's a fairly straightforward, beginner-friendly colorwork. It's done through slipped stitches. My version is made in the West Yorkshire Blue-Faced Lancaster Fleece DK. I think I got that order right. I can never remember the exact order of the last four words, but something along those lines. And it's a really beautiful, like, loosely spun wool yarn that is really cozy, and I think it is a great sweater for cold days. We actually just got a polar vortex come in where I live, and so it's quite chilly outside, and I think it's like a great time to wear this sweater. So yeah, this is my Alder sweater. I adore it, would highly recommend it, and I think that's it. To be totally honest, I wasn't entirely sure if I was going to film this video because up until a couple days ago when I was planning for like what I was going to say in this video, I hadn't actually like concretely sat down and revisited my 2024 goals. A lot of the goals that I made last year were intentional with the way I wanted to like structure how I knit and consumed like knitting content slash yarn, etc. And so I didn't feel the need to really sit down and reflect, but for the sake of transparency and growing, I thought I would just take some time to actually sit down and talk about it. With that, let's just go through each one and talk about what went well, what didn't go well, and how I'm going to adjust them for 2025 because, like I said earlier, basically all the goals slash intentions I had last year, I'm going to roll them over into this year with some tweaks to hopefully be a little bit more successful from like a absolute perspective, if that makes sense. The first one was prioritize my inventory. And I'm going to start straight off the bat and say I was not successful with this one because I definitely ended 2024 with more yarn and not using some of the yarn that I brought into 2024. But that being said, I've been thinking about this one a lot, and I think I know why I was unsuccessful, and I think it was because of how I defined when I could buy more yarn. If you guys didn't watch the 2024 video, basically my goal was to prioritize the yarn that I had on hand, and I was doing so by defining something as the 100 unit threshold. And this was basically anything that was like a new skein or hank or like single quantity of yarn, not including minis and scrap. I was defining that as a unit. So I was saying that if I had 100 units or less in my stash, I could then go and move forward to buy more yarn. So that was hopefully gonna keep me like contained in the fact that my stash would never get bigger than 100 units. I was really good and on track with this up until April. I actually hit like the 99 unit number sometime in April. And then April happened and it was local yarn store day. I went to Toronto Knit City and I bought a whole bunch of yarn then, which was allowed because I had hit that 100 unit threshold. But that being said, after that, I think I just kind of like opened the floodgates and kind of went crazy. I didn't go crazy in the sense that I was just buying everything, but I stopped respecting that 100 unit rule that I had made myself. I think this didn't work for me because in my mind, it was kind of like an all or nothing as opposed to being intentional. Like there was this part of me that was like, oh, I've made it, so I can just buy more. And then I just never went back down. I just kept buying more. So I still want to prioritize my stash this year. And I'm tweaking it to the sense that I'm going to try to prioritize the yarn that I have. However, the threshold of 100 units is no longer going to be happening. And instead, I'm kind of going to just be more intentional. What I mean by that is that I'm allowed to buy yarn if it is planned for and I want to cast it on immediately with reason. So obviously I can't just like go out and cast on anything whenever I have the thought. But if I'm applying for a test knit and I don't have yarn in stash, I can go out and buy that yarn, assuming I cast it on like relatively immediately instead of buying yarn and hoarding it for later. So that way things are like actively moving. And then the other layer of this is that I want to prioritize buying from local yarn stores / only the amount that I need. I don't know about you, but that free shipping threshold at stores really gets me, because why order $100 of yarn and pay $15 in shipping when you can buy $250 of yarn and get free shipping, right? No. So that's what I used to use. Moving forward, I'm gonna try to like nip that in the bud, because I would really like to just be more intentional with what I bring in and what I use. If I can buy it from a local store and not have to pay for shipping at all, that's the top priority. If I have to ship it, then I'm gonna be really intentional with like only shipping the project amount that I want. I know in the grand scheme I'm paying more for shipping, but I think long-term wise, I'll be paying less. That's how I'm kind of framing my prioritize my yarn inventory stash, whatever you want to call it, for 2025. Hopefully it works a little bit better. Long story short, I'm still planning on prioritizing my inventory. I just am trying to go at it with a little bit more of a healthier mindset as opposed to an all or nothing. Goal number 2 was design something. I was, again, not successful with this because I didn't actually follow through with that and design anything last year. I did have one time where I came pretty close. I had started, and then I got busy with a test knit, and so I put that project on like hold. And then by the time I came back, I realized I wanted to change something about the design I was creating. So I ended up frogging the whole thing, and so I have made progress and then went back to 0 progress. I feel okay about not doing it last year. I still created a whole bunch of amazing garments that I'm really happy with. Are there still ideas in my mind? Yes. Will I eventually want to kind of knit them into reality? Also yes, but I find that knitting is, for me, a very big part of my like downtime. And sometimes I just don't want to finish work and then think about working on something else, even if it's something that I want to do. So published patterns are still my go-to because you just follow them kind of like mindlessly. Mindlessly is not the right word, but like a little bit more kind of free-flowingly. You don't have to think about them as hard because someone's already done the math, someone's already done the construction thinking. I will say I did earlier this week sketch a little design of what I want to knit. If I do decide to like plan something, the one that's like on the forefront of my mind is like a cable stockinette sweater with like a split hem. There's still some things about it that I'm not entirely sure what I want to do specifically, but that is more than I did last year. Last year I just kind of started. This year I was like, you know what, maybe I'll actually take some time to plan it. So I've made a small amount of progress already. And if that's the only progress I make for a couple months, that's fine. I just am putting this out there into the world that eventually I would like to design something for myself. And yeah, nothing really big I'm changing about this one. It's still just a general goal that I would like to have. And hopefully it will become reality. The next 2 goals were separate in 2024, but I'm gonna talk about them together because they are both along the lines of trying new things. So this was both the try a new technique as well as try a new construction. And in general, I would say I was pretty successful with this goal from last year because I just kind of tried new things as they came along. If there was a pattern that I saw that I really enjoyed, that had a new element of it, I was like, confident enough in my knitting abilities and skills that I was like, you know what, I could just try it. And through that, I tried bottom up garments. I tried different constructions. So I started a contiguous t-shirt. I did finish it in 2025, but I still count that as like trying it in 2024. I worked on some drop shoulders. I largely had this goal because 2023 was my first full year of knitting, and so I wanted to learn more things because I found that you needed to try things in order to learn things, and I wanted to apply that thought process to 2024. So I think this goal will be something that I carry through for the rest of my knitting / crafting journey. I don't have anything specific I want to try / learn except for steeking. That being said, I don't have any immediate plans for like a steeked garment in mind, and if I'm trying to prioritize my yarn stash, I would have to spend some time and either repurpose a project yarn that I already have in mind, or I'd have to go out and buy more. So I would eventually like to try that. Whether or not it will be this year, I'm not sure, because it kind of conflicts with an earlier goal. But that being said, I just want to try new things because I still do think that's the best way to kind of grow and learn. Overall, I would say last year was successful, and I would like to move forward into 2025 with the same mindset about learning new things, and hopefully 2025 will be just as successful. Goal number 5 was to embrace monogamy. I would say I was like kind of successful with this one, depending on how you would define monogamy. If you're defining it as you only ever have one work in progress at a given time and you finish that project until you start a new one, then I failed. If you're defining that as prioritizing one specific project at a given time, then I would say I was pretty successful with this. And the way I think about that is because in 2023, I had a handful of whips that I brought into 2024. That number of whips is pretty much the same as in I still have 2023 whips that I'm bringing into 2025. I don't know why I'm holding the number 3 up, but you know what I mean. If you compare that to the number of whips that I had in 2024 and then bringing it into 2025, it's significantly lower, and I think that's because of this goal. Last year, I mainly was working on one project at a time from like a focus perspective, and if I did abandon a project, I left it in a place where it was a better time to abandon it versus what I did historically. And for example, I've been learning over the course of my knitting journey that I'm really bad at sleeve island, and I'm really bad at making seam sleeves, especially if I don't do them back to back. So if I left a project off where one sleeve was done and I needed to do another sleeve, the likelihood of me wanting to pick that up and finish that were significantly lower. Now, if I'm gonna leave a project to kind of be a whip for later, I would not do both sleeves so that when I do work on that project in the future, I finish both sleeves at the same time. Basically, I will work on a project as much as I can, try to finish it, and if I don't finish it, I try to leave it in a place for future me where they will want to work on it. So I don't get left with these projects that were kind of frankly left in a bad spot, in my opinion, to pick up, or like annoying spot to pick up. I think I've been pretty good with this. I really like how I've kind of shifted my mindset and I'm working primarily on one given project at a given time. I think it's been very good for the way I think, because you kind of are like engrossed in a project and it's easier just to start and finish one more or less at the same time. That being said, I don't think I will ever be a single project person. I will continuously have multiple. I think right now I have like 3, but one of which I am dropping to be a long-term whip. But I left it in a spot where I think when I pick it up in the future, it will be easy to keep going. Goal number 6 was be more intentional with project selection. And this one was a very broad goal with the main focus of when I was picking a project to work on to think about who I was supporting and what that meant. So last year, the main focus was to prioritize size inclusive patterns, where I was defining it as 60 inches or greater. And I would say I was pretty successful with this because I think more or less every project that I intentionally decided to pick up was size inclusive and part of a designer that I really wanted to support. I do want to carry this forward in terms of prioritizing smaller creators and size inclusive ones. I think towards the tail end of the year, I was not talking about it as much, but that's not to say I haven't been thinking about it. And so in general, moving forward, I will still be prioritizing patterns that have a bigger size range, both small and large. I was focused very heavily on the larger, the plus size range, but I was actually realizing there's a lot of garments that actually sometimes don't go small enough for people because the smallest they go is like an 80 centimeter bust, which is my size, which I'm fairly thin, I recognize that. But there are people who are smaller who might not want a lot of ease that are also kind of like not being included. However, I also am going to change this kind of goal a little bit because I also want to expand it outwards to kind of being more intentional for pattern selection for my sake. I think the size inclusive and supporting like smaller designer goal is a great like community goal in my opinion. Like it's something I want to do for the community. But I also want to tweak this in terms of kind of prioritizing patterns that like I personally would like to wear and knit. Because when I was filming my Everything I Knit in 2024 video, which if you haven't seen already, I will link that in one of the cards above, as well as in the description below if you want to check that out. I did a try on all of my projects that I made last year, and I kind of did it in a roast or toast style where I was evaluating what I did or did not like about each one. Retrospectively think there were more roasts than I would have liked, because in my personal opinion, the goal would be to have everything be a toast, you know? While I recognize that part of the creating process sometimes doesn't go as planned, but I would like to maximize the number of toasts, and in order to do that, I think I need to be very intentional with the patterns that I actually do decide to knit up this year. This is just going to be me thinking very critically about a garment if I choose to, one, buy the pattern, and two, knit the pattern. This also applies to test knit because I love the test knit experience. I love working with designers and kind of like having that deadline and like trying something new. But I also think because of that, sometimes I get a little bit of a FOMO perspective when I apply, and therefore I apply for things that retrospectively, I probably wouldn't have purchased them on my own. Not because it's a bad garment, just because it's not something that would fit into my wardrobe very well. And so I think I'm going to be very much more intentional with all of that planning moving forward. This might conflict the earlier try new things goal, but I think I can do them both at the same time as long as I'm like honest with myself. Alrighty, the very last goal that I have to share with you guys is one that again, I think is going to be a long-term goal, not just for 2025, but also onwards. And that is take breaks and stretch more. In 2023, I had a minute where I sat down towards the end of the year because I was working on a lot of projects and I was starting to get a lot of hand tension. And at that point, I think I was realizing that like I need to take care of my like physical being in order to be able to do this long term, because it is something that I do really love, but I don't want to be hindered by like carpal tunnel or like muscle aches or whatever that case may be. So in 2024, when the new year rolled around, I made the goal to stretch more and take breaks. And I would like to say that I'm very proud of myself that I stuck with it. I was pretty good at either taking a break and stretching for a little bit before continuing knitting, and or just like stopping knitting altogether. I will also say I did start incorporating different knitting like tensioning strategies. Towards the end of the year last year was starting to not only knit continental, but I did also throwing. I would change the way I would tension. I found so far that it hasn't really affected the way that my project looks, thankfully, but I think also incorporating different ways of holding the yarn has really helped with that, so I'm not just repeating the same exact motion endlessly for forever. So I would love to carry this forward, and I would love to give you guys a friendly reminder to take breaks and take care of yourself, both physically and mentally, because I don't know, I think it's important and it's something that gets overlooked, and especially in a very productivity era where we reward people who produce a lot of stuff very quickly. But I think we also need to take a step back and reward people who are very intentional and creating things at their own pace and being kind to themselves. That is a reflection of all of my 2024 knitting goals, how I'm planning on incorporating them and adapting them into 2025. I think overall, the goal of this year, and pretty much any year I think, will be to be intentional with just like how I'm creating and all processes of that. I think at the end of the day, this is something I really enjoy and I'd like to enjoy it long term, and the only way to do that long term is to have a healthy mindset for it. So that is the foundation of it, coupled with just have fun. I've been in a really good knitting period recently in terms of the finished objects that I've had. I've been really happy with them, and like I think that goes with the planning component and picking good projects as well as good yarn, just having a good experience. And the new projects that I've casted on recently, I've been having a really good time with them, which again, I think also is because I've done really good planning, having good experiences and all that stuff. So I am really excited for 2025 and what it has in store. I apologize if this video was a little boring because it's basically a regurgitation of last year's in terms of what my goals are, but coming to realize that I think long-term goals are maybe sometimes better than yearly goals, because I think long-term goals and intention build better habits as opposed to just goals. Let me know in the comments below what your goals and intentions are for 2025. If you're feeling daring, you can leave a reflection on how you were successful or not in 2024. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, as well as if you want to see more content like this, feel free to hit that subscribe button, and I will probably call it here. So thank you guys again for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye for now.